Hello again everyone, it's Magic Dave here, and I only just published the last video yesterday, and I've just started doing a couple of things this morning. I thought I'd talk about what I'm going to work on. So in the last video I talked a lot about the terrain modification and digging and finding sort of different layers underneath the terrain, and I just set it up so there was a sand layer on the top, and then it went through different layers as you dug down, and that was just for testing purposes. So I've already changed all of that so that it's now creating more interesting sort of terrain types. So when you dig down through, so I've just found some rock here. So if you dig down through the grass, you'll get some dirt and then probably hit rock at varying depths. So it sort of depends where you dig, how much dirt you'll get before you hit rock. And if you dig down through sand, you might find some gravel. And it's all just sort of sitting a bit nicer, and it is actually using the mod framework to assign all the different terrain types and layers. Now from here, I mentioned, I actually said iron ore in the last video, but of course they're not going to go straight into doing iron tools and stuff. So first up, I'm probably going to add flint. But before I got to that, I just wanted to make a bit more variety in the terrain, because as I started looking at this, I just got rid of there were just patches of dirt around. And I think I do want a bit more variety in the grassy plain areas like this. And I want it to be based on sort of a fertility thing, because I think that'll be an interesting game mechanic too. So the first thing I'm going to do is add a new couple of different dirt types, so sort of a fertile soil and then sort of, what's the opposite of fertile, like, arid or, not very fertile soil. And I'll make that so that you can see different grass results on the top as a result of the soil underneath, and then that you'll be able to sort of dig that up and farm in it and make the plants grow a bit faster and that kind of thing. So yeah, so I'll start on that before I get to the flint, and I want to also work on their sort of animations and their progression for digging as well. So yeah, it's all about this it's still about terrain, still about digging, but sort of tying that more into the gameplay. Okay, so I've spent a couple more days working on the terrain. I've actually added flint, so you can see this is a little bit of flint here. It's basically, it'll give you the same kind of tools pretty much as the rock will, but just a little bit better, and the flint resource is going to be a bit more scarce. So I guess you're going to have to choose a little bit what you want to use flint for versus rock, whether you want to make certain tools out of flint and certain tools out of rock and so on. So I think that's a nice little gameplay mechanic, and it was a good way to just get started with a little bit of kind of how ore might work. So yeah, the flint, where you can see it on the surface, you'll also see down the bottom that it says gravel/flint. So there are areas, it probably won't actually tell you that, I'm not sure yet, but it is saying that this ground has flint assigned to it, and so if you dig down, then you'll also get flint when you dig. So yeah, you can see if there's a bit of flint on the surface, then there'll also be flint below. So yeah, I also added different soil quality. Now, so this is poor soil that you can see just down the bottom there. This is just standard kind of soil, and then we've got rich soil over here as well. And so that it doesn't yet, but it will increase the rate at which crops and things grow. So you'd be better off planting in rich soil. And if you dig, then you'll get rich soil. You'll see I've actually got rid of the cube. I did try various different shapes here, and I think I just like these sort of blobby blobs. Yeah, I tried it with sort of hard edges, used an icosahedron and stuff, and it just looked kind of alien. It looked too artificial, whereas this looks quite organic, and I think it's going to work. But anyway, so yeah, you've got rich soil, poor soil, so you can sort of dig up rich soil, bring it over to where you want, plonk it down like I've got here, and grow stuff a bit quicker. So yeah, I've got sort of more plans to do with all of that stuff, but I'm going to leave that there for now. I should say also the actual locations of where it decides to put rich soil and poor soil do depend on the terrain a bit. So like if it's quite steep, it'll tend to be a bit poorer. I actually went in, so like here's a sort of cliffy area. That's all kind of poor soil. I changed the way that cliffs work to try to fix some issues where trees would sort of spawn on rock surfaces and stuff. So I worked quite a bit on the kind of cliff assignment stuff, so that's all improved. And yeah, also I guess rich soil can occur a bit more frequently near rivers and things too, which is quite cool. And also the forest density is tied to the soil richness as well. So this is dense forests and rich soil, and that's kind of going to be tend to be together. Whereas when you go out to these sort of poorer soil quality, then you're going to have a lot less trees. So after working on all of that, I just felt like doing something a bit different, and I looked at the Sapiens rendering in the water. So previously they would just be rendered as if the water wasn't there, and they didn't have any kind of change of colouring, and also their reflections were incorrect, so they were getting reflected up above the surface of the water, and that occurred with all sorts of different things, like different objects too. If they were underwater, there were problems, whereas now they're getting rendered correctly, so that's nice. It means that I can have grass sort of growing in the edges of the water again and stuff, and yeah, it's nice to have the water all kind of working correctly without any nasty artifacts or anything. Obviously, he's standing underneath the water, and they'll just walk around, run around under the water as though it doesn't exist. I still have to work on that and get them to actually swim, or at least splash around a bit and stuff, and not just walk through the water. But I'll get there eventually. So next up, I've decided to work on things like the campfires and on sleeping and on their kind of general behaviours. At the moment, there's no real need to build a campfire. It looks pretty, but unless, you can cook meat on it, but other than that, it's just an aesthetic thing. Same with houses and pretty much beds and everything like that. There's just no real need to do any of it. It's really time to sort that out and actually get some proper gameplay going as far as interacting with objects and how the Sapiens behave around things. So yeah, I'm going to start with campfires, and then I'll probably work on beds and things too, and sort of make it so that they really actually need to sleep, and need to sleep undercover as well, and not just out under the stars every night. So yeah, I want to get started on all of that, and we'll see how I get on. Okay, so I've made some good progress with getting them to sit near the fire. So they actually, when they get tired and they want to rest, they'll sort of look around and see if there's anything interesting that they might want to sit down near, and then they'll also try to find seats. So they can now sit on logs, and they can sit on the beds as well. So yeah, there are still some sort of issues, like you can see that he's sort of standing up and then sitting back down again. I'm still working on some of that stuff, and yeah, making sure that they're not going to sit exactly where someone else is. And also they're just at the moment they tend to look down. They're looking usually at the seat that they're sitting on, and that's sort of how the order system is kind of working. And for most things, they do want to look at the object that they're sort of interacting with. But when you're sitting, you don't just sit down and look at the seat you're sitting on. That just makes you look kind of sad. So yeah, there is more work to do. I'm finding that I've actually spent quite a few days on this, and it's really mostly just the AI, just tidying up AI. Creating systems that are going to work. Sitting is complicated because it's an order that or an action that can be kind of combined with other things. And if you just sit and you do nothing, then it just it looks a bit wrong. So they need to start interacting with each other as well as sitting. So yeah, that's sort of what I have to work on next, is actually a little bit of multitasking, which could get interesting. So anyway, I just thought I'd show you where I'm at with that. It is really nice to have them actually coming and gathering together in the evenings like this. But yeah, obviously a bit more work to go yet to sort of tidy things up. So I'm going to work on that now, and we'll see how I get on. Cool, so I've managed to implement a bit of multitasking now, so they actually look around when they're sitting. He sort of will look at other people. They'll wave as they're walking if they're not carrying anything, and yeah, they're sort of acting a lot more like people, which is really cool. Like just seeing them actually sort of acknowledge each other as they're walking around is pretty awesome. Waving while they're sitting. The interactions are very, very simple, but it's just so good to see something rather than always just sort of looking like this, looking sad, looking down. They're actually looking around at what's going on around them. They'll look at chickens as they're walking past and things like that too. So that's working well. She's sitting facing away from the campfire because it wasn't lit, so they sort of know that whether or not campfires are lit or not. The campfire actually went out, and that's a new thing too. So it's burning through fuel, and it will slowly burn through each branch and eventually go out. And when it goes out, you have to go get a bunch more fuel and relight it again, which is what's happening here. The campfires will take pine cones and even these big logs. The big logs will burn for a lot longer than the pine cones, and the branches are sort of in the middle. And as you can see, it's getting quite a lot darker than it used to, and I will definitely add an option for that. But I thought when I was sort of looking, I was looking at some of the pine trees at night in particular, and I thought that they looked just a bit odd. And I remembered that I'd added this ambient light at night time because, you know, it did get a bit dark. So yeah, I'll make it an option, but for now, yeah, it's quite a lot darker. Yeah, so the size of the fire depends on how much fuel is there, and as it burns through each log, it'll turn into sort of a burnt bit of charcoal that then can be replaced. I did look at I was trying to think how you would manage fuel. So you don't want a fire to just constantly burn through fuel all the time. So I basically figured that if you put it out, then it won't take any more fuel. But if it's lit and you have someone around who has been assigned the fire skill like this guy, then they will keep it lit. So he can go off, and every time it needs a new log, he can just go grab one as long as there's one nearby. So it's all quite a nice organic way of dealing with it, so that you don't have to actually go in with some kind of user interface to manage it all. Another thing that I just sort of started looking at is how flint tools are going to be different from your sort of stone tools, and how more advanced tools might show up a little bit differently. So we've got a multiplier which will affect kind of the speed and perhaps what you might get back when you do certain actions. So that'll be different depending on each kind of tool and each kind of material. So that's just a little bit of kind of stats stuff that could be quite interesting. Just help you to choose what you want to craft given what you have around you and stuff. It's very gamey, and I quite like it. So I'm going to keep experimenting with that and keep kind of filling this out with more different types of tools and materials as we go along. Related to all this UI stuff, I know I was talking about when we were filling, and in particular, I mentioned how I didn't really like this, and quite a few people sort of mentioned that they'd like to see another radial menu around here with all the different types. The reason that I did this is because it was just the quickest, easiest way of getting the functionality in place. I know that there'll be a number of different materials here to choose from, and that this is potentially, this user interface could change quite significantly, and it needs to be general purpose for various other things that you might queue up around this action UI anyway. So really, this was just the quickest way of getting the functionality in place, and that tends to be how I design UI. There's no point in trying to make everything look really pretty and really easy to use until you know what the functionality is that you require. So yeah, I just want to say, of course I've thought of adding these sort of extra radial things. Everything you see is a work in progress. All of this stuff, there's these funny buttons down here, and when you inspect stuff, all of this is going to change. I'm just chucking stuff down here. There's buttons that will turn into other things that will have icons instead of text and all sorts of stuff. So don't look too closely at it. Don't worry too much about how messy it might look now, because it will be improved. So I'm probably going to leave it there for this video. There's lots and lots of little things that are getting done, and quite a lot of them are sort of behind the scenes and lots of little tweaks and things. But it is starting to feel like things are coming together, even if we're not getting into any late game content or anything yet. So I'm going to carry on from here and keep refining things, and we'll see what I end up working on next time. Cheers.